Good morning, everyone. Come on in. Thank you for joining us on this morning. I see you as you're coming in. Annette, Camille, Doug, John, Kristen, Lindsay, Wolfgang. It's good to see you all. Some familiar names. Thank you for joining us on this morning. Good morning, Camille. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Rick. Good to see you all. Good to see everyone on this morning. Go ahead and drop a good morning in the chat. Good morning. Let me know how you're doing this morning. Have your coffee ready. Good morning, Annette. Good morning, Kristen. Good to see you all. Thank you again for joining. Top of the world. Awesome, Camille. Thank you again for joining. We're going to get started in just a moment, but excited to see you all. Yes, of course. Thank you, Jordan. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those questions in the chat throughout our session on this morning. Good morning, Rick. Good to see you. Awesome. And we will have a Q&A session at the end of our time together. And we will take care of those questions for you. But come on in as you are joining. Grab your coffee, whatever your morning beverage of choice, and we will get started in just one moment. All right, but again, thank you so much for joining us on this morning for this webinar, Mastering the New ACT Online Prep Platform. And of course, today's target, we are going to discuss strategies towards the end for educators and leaders. But before we jump in, my name is Eboney Edwards. For those of you who do not know me, I am the Senior Instructional Advisor here at Mastery Prep, and I'm so glad that you are joining us on today. Now, this session is designed to help you feel confident using the ACT Online Prep platform powered by Mastery Prep, no matter what level of experience you have with online prep. My goal today is simple, and it is to get you ready to guide your students toward success using this online platform. So we're going to walk through the platform together and talk about practical ways to implement it, both from an independent student practice perspective as well as classroom integration. So you can think of this as your hands-on tour of everything you'll need to support your teachers, your students, and your test prep goals. Now, our objectives for today, by the end of our time together, you will have been able to explore the student experience with ACT Online Prep and see how it engages your students in short interactive learning moments, as well as you'll see how our teachers and administrators use this tool to assign work, monitor progress, and report on the students' performance as well as progress. And also, we will be able to apply best practices for implementing the platform effectively, whether you're supporting the students independently or you're using it right inside the classroom. So we're going to keep things simple and visual and hands-on. So as Jordan mentioned, please feel free to drop your questions or observations in the chat as we go. And I want to make this feel somewhat like a conversation and not so much as a lecture, even though we are on the webinar. All right, so I get an understanding of who all we have with us on today. If you could drop in the chat who you are representing on today, whether you are a Mastery Prep representation, serious representation, whether you are representing a school or a campus, drop in that chat for me who you are representing on today. Shout out your company, your title. Let me know where you are coming in with us from on today. Come on, drop it in the chat. I see you, Annette, Serious Ops Manager, Doug, Mastery Prep with Serious. Thank you. Rick, Rookie Account Manager. Good to see you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much for joining. Good. I know that regardless of what level you have, Serious, but all of the above, we are one. We are absolutely one. Thank you so much for all of our Serious team members that are joining in with with us. Robert, good to see you on today. Thank you so much for all of you who are joining us. And again, whether you are on one side or the other, you will be able to walk away today feeling more confident talking about how our platform together can help our teachers and our students grow. All right, now let's dive in by looking at exactly what the student experience looks like. All right, of course, we start with the student dashboard because the students' engagement is key. When the students aren't engaged, everything else struggles to fall in place. So let's look at what it looks like when the students log in. Now, when the students log in, the very first thing that they are going to notice is their dashboard. It is a clear snapshot of where they are, their progress. They see any diagnostic or any online lesson that's waiting for them. As you can see, it's clean, it's visual, and it's focused on helping them start working right away. You notice that by this large start button here as soon as the students log in. So students can easily jump into their next lesson or review past work without getting lost in the navigation. They don't have to look around to see where to click first. They look for maybe that start or that continue button, and that's where the students can easily jump in. So they focus on learning and not figuring out what to click next. Now, our first major step in our platform is to make sure that every student is completing a diagnostic test. Now, this diagnostic test is a short and adaptive assessment, and it doesn't just measure performance for our students. It maps out each student's skill level across the ACT domains. Now, with it being an adaptive test, the student is not going to necessarily see every single skill that is assessed on a full-length practice test, but they are going to see just enough as they answer questions and a diagnostic test adapts in order for the adaptive engine to build out the roadmap that they need in order to focus on what areas they need for growth. So this diagnostic is going to help personalize their study plan to tailor to the student's strengths and the area that the student needs to grow in. So when the student clicks on this start button, immediately it's going to go into that diagnostic start screen. Now here we're starting with our English diagnostic. It tells our students that they have 15 questions to answer, that it's untimed, and then they can leave the test at any moment if they need to by simply clicking on this arrow at the top left. Once the student clicks the Start Test button, immediately they will go into the actual diagnostic. Now, this is a screenshot of our reading test. You'll notice that there's a passage on the left-hand side, and then there's the 15 questions here on the right-hand side. As each student finds that answer, the question here acknowledges what the student is asked to do. It even mentions the highlighted portion here. The student will choose their answer, and then the Submit Answer button will activate. At that point, the student would click Submit Answer, and then it would navigate them to question number 2. Now, since this is an adaptive test, the student will not be able to navigate back and forth between questions. Why? Somebody is willing to jump out there and give it a shot. You could always tell me, well, why do you think that the student is unable to navigate back and forth between their questions once they've already answered a question in the diagnostic? I'll give you an opportunity to answer that before I move on and give you the answer. All right, any takers? In 5, 4, 3, 2, responses. Doug, yes, responses drive what questions come next. Bingo. Thank you, Doug. As stated in this adaptive diagnostic, those answers drive what's going to happen with the student's next question. So when the student clicks submit, they go through all of those questions, all of those 15 questions. And then, as I mentioned before, their performance on the diagnostic is going to allow the system to produce an adaptive study plan for the student. So This is where that adaptive magic starts within that study plan. So after the student has completed the diagnostic, they will receive a diagnostic score range. Again, it's going to give them what they need in order to determine their independent or their adaptive study plan. Each student's study plan is based on their particular performance. So if they master a particular skill, the platform will move another skill that they need more support in to the top of the list. And depending on how many hours are assigned to that entire study plan, those other skills that they may have already mastered will fall towards the end of that list. All right, so here you can see once the student has completed the diagnostic, they have the opportunity to go into the specific study plan here on that left navigation toolbar. Now, as you can see, again, that dashboard is showing them the progress they made. It also allows them to click into any study plan that they would like to move forward on. Now here, if we click in the English section, you'll notice that this is a screenshot of a student that has done a little more work in their actual online lesson. You'll notice they have 5% complete. It also shows that diagnostic test score range as well as when they completed it. And then it gives them the opportunity to go into that next online lesson, which here could be verb tense, or if they're following the path that the study plan is directing them to, they can simply come over and click resume, and it will resume with their transitions practice. All right, now within those online lessons, each one of those online lessons is a short micro video. All right, we focus on our micro videos because it allows our students to be able to engage quickly. They watch the short video for direction, for instruction, for additional support, and then the system immediately gives them an action or something to do, whether it's a practice question that they will complete or a simple activity that's building on the rigor in that online lesson as the student makes their way through that particular lesson. So here, the student would watch this video. They would see the instruction here that says choose a part of speech from the drop-down menu to complete the statement. And here they would click on the drop-down menu and see what options it has available for them. So let's actually go into the platform and see how that works. So here I'm going to, as a student, click on lessons here, and we will go into our resume by clicking the resume button. And then here, our
Verbs really are the time travelers of grammar. Think about it. Verbs determine whether a sentence happens in the past, present, or future. The key is identifying the time or tense of the verbs. Do you know the tense of the verbs in these sentences?
All right. Do you know the tense of the verbs in these sentences? Let's try one together. So here we say, number one, we will arrive next Tuesday. All right. Our verb, someone want to drop it in the chat? All right. Our verb is yes. All right. Annette says our verb is in future tense. All right. So let's choose future and perfect. We got that one correct. Number two, my sister loathes peanut butter. All right. So we're going to select, let's say this is past tense, although we know that it's not
The
past.
past tense of the verb loathe is loathed. But it seems like the sister is loathing peanut butter right now. What tense is that?
All right, so as you notice, it gives us some redirection and also allows us to be able to correct. Yes, Camille gives immediate feedback. Awesome. Yes. And Rick, now this needs to be replaced with present tense. Awesome. So now we see that we got that one correct. Number three, they ate, which we know that is past tense. All right, we see that we got them correct. The student can now click continue at the bottom of the screen and move on to the next online course. All right. So as our students continue to navigate through, when they come back to our dashboard, you will notice that it will update them on the progress that they have. They also can move to a different subject and start on a different online course in a different subject. So again, it shows you the student has flexibility to move to whatever online course is in the follow-up plans for them as they navigate through the adaptive or the manual course. Now, we also have full length practice tests available for our students. Now, whether you choose to give that full length practice test at the beginning of the assessment or whether you do it at some other time, which we'll talk about during our best practices, the student can take a full length practice test versus that diagnostic. Now, that full length practice test is designed to simulate the real ACT experience. It's timed, it's scored, and it allows the students to focus on building endurance as well as confidence. Now, each new test gives both students and teachers the data that they can use. It'll show them growth over time, strengths by domain, as well as skills that they are still developing. Now, when the student has a practice test assigned to them, they will come to the left navigation toolbar, click on practice test, and notice they have the ability to start on whichever test is being directed by their teacher. As they choose one of the start test buttons, the student will be able to navigate here. As you can see, we chose math. It will give the students direction that they have 45 questions to answer and they have 50 minutes to complete the test. Once again, they also can leave this test at any time and they can save their progress again simply by clicking the left arrow to navigate out of the test. Once they click that start test button, it immediately takes them into that practice test where you can see the student will have questions 1 through 45. Immediately, they have that question to refer to as well as their answer choices to select from. Now, here, what is different, once again, as we mentioned from our diagnostic test, is what? If we navigate down below underneath the question, we will see that the student can now navigate back and forth between their questions. They can click next once they've selected their answer, or they can move forward not answering this question to move on to a question that they may think is more accessible for them to complete. But they can always navigate back to the previous question. And then finally, once the students have completed or answered all those test questions within the time period, they can simply click the submit test button and the test will be submitted for scoring. So now that we've seen the student side with its engagement, with its adaptivity, and how it builds to keep the students active within their learning, now we can shift gears over to the teacher or administrative side, where the teachers can manage all of this from this side of their platform. So we can see how easy it is for our teachers to be able to assign work through the study plan, track the students' progress, as well as pull data that they need to help guide their instruction. Now, once again, when the teacher logs in, you're going to see a dashboard that is similar to the simplicity of the student side. Right when they log in, they'll easily be able to see their class groups and how to manage them. Of course, they have filters here at the top where they can select or create different views that they want to look at, that they view frequently. But again, they easily can navigate through this left navigational toolbar to make sure that they're able to navigate through their teaching tools, whether they're looking at reporting in their insight section, or whether they're analyzing data or looking at profiles with their users and their groups. All of these things, of course, are designed to help our teachers save time. All right, now, as you can see here, as we expand on each of our navigational areas on our toolbar, you'll see grouped together all of those tools that the teachers will use as they are instructing or leading their classes. As we started with our students, we always like to start with displaying our study plans. Now here, when a teacher is clicking on their study plan from the navigation side, they'll be able to click into any subject that they would like to dig deeper into, and that will allow them to see exactly how to set up their student study plans on that side. Now, our student study plans can be done in two different options, whether they keep it in adaptive mode. And I say keep it because adaptive is our default. And of course, this is going to be perfect for our independent learning or differentiated learning. And this is the mode that builds the student's path based on their diagnostic test. Again, they also can edit the plan to have a manual mode. Now, this is going to be ideal when you want to match lessons to what you're currently teaching in class. This flexibility between adaptivity and manual allows the teachers to personalize instruction without doubling the workload. So whether you want to have your students work on the platform led by you in the manual way, or whether you want their study plan to be driven by their diagnostic, the system will support both approaches seamlessly. Now, when a teacher gets ready to manually change something, the only thing they would need to do is navigate over here to our action section and click Edit Plan. This is going to allow them to be able to see what areas of the plan they can change. Now, here they're able to see first what practice test or within the study plan, this is referenced as their diagnostic, as well as they'll also be able to see what changes they can make in their hours. So here you'll see that it's still in our adaptive study plan mode, but the teachers have a way to modify the number of hours. So whether they want to adjust their hours from 8 hours or they want to simplify it down to a shortened number of hours, they can modify that here. They also can completely change, as we mentioned before, from adaptive to manual simply by coming over to the right-hand side and converting this to a manual plan. When they change this to a manual plan, you'll notice that they have two options, whether they generate the plan from basically a cheat sheet or they can start from a blank plan. Now, best practices for us, we always start with the cheat sheet or from the generate plan option, which allows us to see basically the plan that is recommended and then make changes based on that. So here we can see that, of course, our best practice is going to start with that diagnostic plan, and then we have those recommended lessons listed out for our teachers. At this point, they can click anywhere from reorder. They can change the order of these lessons based on how they are navigating those lessons or what they're teaching in class, as well as they can add breaks, they can add or delete lessons, whatever they are directed to do based on how they're structuring their sequence of their lessons, they can do this within their editing or their action section of the study plan. Again, this demonstrates for our teachers as well as administrators how easy it is to be able to change the sequence of lessons, add groups of lessons, remove lessons, or just make adjustments that they feel are fit for what their students are doing within their classes. Now, as we mentioned, within the diagnostic or within the study plan, there is a diagnostic already. But when the teachers or administrators want to give their students a true full length ACT test experience, then they can assign a test administration window. Test administration is done simply by navigating to that left navigation, clicking that test administration button, and then adding a new practice test by clicking this button here on the right-hand side. Once they click that button, you'll notice that the screen will allow them to come in and add the details for them to add that test administration window. The first thing they would do here is simply name that test for their students. Then they would come in and add the specific content. They would click Change Test. It would populate for them to add Practice Test 1 or Practice Test 2. Again, if this is the first time they're doing it, we suggest best practice of ACT Test 1, and then you'll have ACT Practice Test 2 to use as a post test. And then depending on the level, whether the teachers are administrating the test or the administrators are administrating the test, then we can assign who this test is assigned to, whether we decide to honor it or to assign it by a specific class. You'll see this is assigned to our honors English 10th grade class. So this is assigned by a teacher, or if we assign it by an administrator can assign it by school or even by a grade level. And then here, another very important feature here is where we have our settings. So we can determine our open date for our settings, as well as our close date with a specific time. And then finally, we can determine when we want those answers displayed. Now, by default, it's going to display them immediately. But since we know that our students would never want to share things on their own, we're going to make it easier for them to keep those answers under wraps until the test window closes. So you can select this drop-down menu, choose Display Answers on Close, and then once the test window closes here at 10:31 at 3:30 p.m., then those answers will be displayed for the students and they can go back and review the details of their test. Now, they will still receive their answer. They still will receive their score. I'm sorry. They'll still receive their scores, but the answers will not be displayed. Once the administrator or the teacher has completed setting up all of the settings, they can come to the bottom to that create button and they can choose that create button, and that will allow them to submit that test window. Once they've submitted it, then you will see that it will populate on their test administration dashboard, and they'll again be able to see the class they assigned it to, who created it, what content was assigned, as well as the information about when it was open and when it closes. All right, moving on to another of our teaching tools are our bell ringers. Now, again, this is one of my favorite tools because they are easy, short, ACT aligned questions that you can use at the start of the class to warm up your students' brains. It's a low hanging fruit for easy implementation into the classroom, and they come ready with timers, explanations, as well as answer keys. So if we were to come in and log into a specific area of bell ringers, we can choose whatever subject we would like to go into. And here you'll notice that it is going to give us a list of topics. By default, you'll see them in alphabetical order. But here, if we were to choose our adjectives and adverbs topic, you'll notice that the dashboard has five rather exercises for this topic. Each one of those exercises is simply one test question. The system also will monitor whether the teacher has completed this in their class, as well as allows them to choose the Start Next button so they can start on the next option or the next available bell ringer, or they can navigate to whichever bell ringer they would like to navigate to by clicking the play button here. Once they click that play button, they will be able to see that they have the option to start this bell ringer with a timer. This is another best practice to where we encourage our teachers to use the time that the students would naturally be focused on within the test. So with an English question, it would be under a minute. So we would want to change this timer to reflect a minute of time. Once the teacher clicks the start button, the teacher will be able to display that bell ringer on their smartboard, on the projector screen within their classroom. They will also allow their students to work on this independently. They'll see the timer is here at the top. The students can view this question. And then depending on the practices that you use in your classroom for keeping track of your students' score or students' answers, then the student can choose their answer, mark that within a notebook, a note card, however you manage the bell ringers in your classroom. And then once the time is up, then the teacher has the ability to show the answer. Once the teacher shows the answer, again, they have the full answer explanation, as well as an explanation of all incorrect answers, as well as that answer key. As we mentioned before, teachers can also use that mark complete button to keep track of those bell ringers that they've already completed. And then once they navigate back to that dashboard, then they will be able to see and monitor those lessons or those bell ringers that have already been completed. And finally, so you've seen how the students have navigated or worked through their independent practice or their study plan, their diagnostic, as well as a practice test. You've also seen how the teachers are able to make adjustments to the study plans, implement their bell ringers, as well as assign a practice test to the students. Now we're going to see how it looks once the student has some activity and your teachers are able to monitor and analyze their performance. Now, here again within our insights section of our dashboard or our navigation, you'll notice that we start with usage. All right, now our usage, of course, is going to answer the questions: are students logging in and completing work? Well, here you can see yes. From the top, depending on what filters you have in place, whether you're an administrator or whether you're a teacher, you can see that the group that is filtered here have on average completed about a fourth of a test. When looking at ACT, that would translate into about one section of a test. And you can see an average of how many questions they've answered across the content that they've worked on. As you can see here, even within our reporting, you'll notice that there's information on the number of tests completed, sections completed, questions answered, page views, as well as time spent and login. So lots of different information for us to quickly get a view of how our students are using the dashboard. Again, we also have a teacher usage report where that is going to allow us to see how the teachers are using it. Now, currently we can see page views as well as logins, but eventually we will also add the data of how the teachers are using and completing those bell ringers. Now, once we have taken a look at how the students and teachers are using the platform, you'll also be able to see their performance. Now, this is going to answer the question, how are my students growing? You'll be able to track their growth across the ACT subjects, as well as view how they're doing with their average on the composite scores. Of course, there's going to be detail here in the reporting side where you can see the content that they're working on, whether it's a practice test or a diagnostic. You'll notice the number of attempts, as well as their score ranges, whether it be an actual scale score or a scale score range for the diagnostic. And then there's also a breakdown of the raw score as well as each of the subjects. There's also an option for us to be able to review our goals within our performance. So teachers and administration have the availability to, or the capacity to set their score goals. So the system will easily show them how they're doing against those thresholds on our reports. So here we notice that we are tracking, depending on what our filters are, we're tracking 3 students overall. And you'll notice here, based on the color codes as well as the thresholds that are shown on their goals, that we have 2 students that are within our range all the way to 22 through 36. And then we have 1 student that has scored a 16. And then you'll also see that is broken down by each of our subjects. And then also when we want to get more into the details of how our students are measuring up within each of our domains and skills, then you'll be able to use our content mastery report, which also can be filtered whether you're filtering on your practice test, your diagnostic, or even your online lessons. You can come in and filter based on what profile you're in, either admin or teacher, your classes, even up to individual students, of how your students are doing on those specific domains. So here we'll see craft and structure. You'll notice they have 54% here. And then following with the skills, you'll be able to dive deeper into each one of those areas that is fueling the craft and structure overall. So if we wanted to look at this from a high level and see what skills should we focus on for a group of students, what would be one of the skills that stands out based on the percentage of how your students are doing in the skills that are listed? What's something that stands out quickly? Drop that percentage, drop that name of that skill. Yes, absolutely. Point of view. Thank you, Camille. 17% of proficiency in point of view would be a red flag for us. So that would easily give us some data on what we can use or what skill we can hone in on for our students in this reading section. Now, since we have looked at our student experience, our teacher and administrative experience, as well as our data, let's take a look at how we can use this platform for independent practice. Now, when our students are working independently, the key is to make sure that their study plan is set up correctly. As we mentioned before, that begins with the diagnostic test. That's going to be the single step of what personalizes each of your students' experiences. Now, once they've completed that diagnostic test, the platform automatically creates that study plan that's tailored to their strengths and their areas of improvement. So it's not necessarily always going to give them only what they need help from, but also it's going to give them information about areas that they need improvement, as well as building off of things that they already are strong in and they just need a simple nudge on. So from there, students can work at their own pace, they can track their progress throughout the dashboard, and they can see real-time feedback as they go, as you saw with the online lessons. All right, I see those questions. Thank you. We're going to get to them in just one moment. All right, now, best practices for managing independent practice. Again, as we mentioned, we always want to start with that diagnostic. That prevents our students from wasting time on skills they've already mastered and puts them in the most effective path forward. Number two, we want to encourage daily engagement, even in small bursts. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes of continuous online work. 15 to 20 minutes a day rather than cramming it all in 1 week. And those micro videos, again, are super effective because they are just 10 seconds to 20 seconds, easily giving that student direction to make sure that they know what they're doing, as well as giving that feedback as needed. Number three, using that adaptive plan and not just manual assignments. So that adaptive branching ensures that each student's learning path adjusts in real time. So if students need extra support, they get it automatically, while students who are ready for more rigor can advance throughout without delay. Number four, actively monitoring that usage and that progress weekly. All right, using those usage reports to check who's logging in, who's completing lessons. Also, using those score reports to identify strengths and areas for growth, just like we did with that content mastery report. Again, you can filter it based on classes, you can filter it to students for you to quickly grab a skill or some content that your students need to retry, maybe with opportunities of one-on-one group lessons, as well as maybe implementing bell ringers to help the students grow in those areas that they have shown they need additional support. Number five, leverage the learn by doing to build consistently. All right, so students in those online lessons are never just watching videos continuously. They're always interacting, which makes our platform more like the student engaging with a private tutor. The student stays engaged, and even if they answer something wrong, they have opportunities to retry and get feedback from those videos coaching. Now, this one is an odd one, but it works. Normalize the mistakes as part of the process. allowing your students to be able to see that they don't have to get perfection in order to get a good score, allowing them to understand how helpful those platform hints are. And the feedback, again, is like them having a tutor that's encouraging them along. All right, number 7, celebrating their progress and not just their perfection. We want you to highlight dashboard progress bars in class or even during in check-ins. Recognize the effort that the students are using as they are completing those lessons and highlighting the growth over time. Again, the more consistent the students are, the more they're going to progress, and you have a better opportunity of highlighting not just perfect scores, but the continuous progress that the students are making. And then finally, number 8, blending accountability with autonomy. When the students are using these platform resources independently, set clear expectations for them, whether it's just having them complete 3 lessons per week, giving those students the freedom of how they complete those lessons so the adaptive branches feel empowering rather than forced for our students. The more power you give them, as well as celebrating the progress they make, is going to definitely give them more encouragement and hopefully will engage them and make them want to complete those lessons because they know they're doing it and they're learning all at the same time. And finally, best practices when you're using the platform within the classroom, meaning integrating those things into the lessons you're teaching. When this is the goal to implement the platform into daily instruction, the manual mode is going to let you assign specific lessons to directly support your class curriculum. So, for example, if you're teaching a lesson on linear equations, you can push that same skill online lesson to the top of your student's study plan, and that allows it to be a guide or another tool that the student uses within the classroom setting. All right, so let's look at how you can bring that same platform features into your daily instruction and test prep routines. Number 1, here are a few example pacing models. Start with those bell ringers, all right? Regardless of whether your students are going to jump into online lessons for that day or whether or not you're going to just simply allow them to do things independently, start with a bell ringer that aligns with the curriculum or the lesson that you are going to focus on for that day. All right, that will allow them to ease into that lesson for the morning, and it allows them to get a jump start on what the overall goal for that lesson is. Number 2, remediation groups. Use those score reports to group your students who are struggling with the same skill. Then assign targeted lessons in your manual study plan, while other students may continue on their adaptive plan. Again, this is a way to allow all of your students to be using the resources, but they may just be using the resources at different times. Again, this allows us to use those small group settings to encourage our students as well as continue to help them grow and they don't feel like they're being isolated or singled out because they may be struggling with a particular skill because they have a group setting for support. And then finally, our test prep cycles. Now, a test prep cycle is simply where weeks leading up to the ACT, you can run a cycle of a specific diagnostic, whether it may be in English, math, reading, or science. You can rerun a diagnostic, then use that adaptive study plan for the students to target their growth and improvement. Then you check their usage, check those scores to make sure that they're seeing the progress. And if they don't, then you have the opportunity for reteaching. And then now your students are getting a sequence, a cycle that they get used to of diagnostic, study plan, online lessons. My teacher is engaging within my score reports and checking my usage. We're getting teaching opportunities, whether it's in small groups or using bell ringers. And now the students are going through the steps that they need in order to build confidence step by step. Now, As you are navigating through the platform, of course, I know that during this webinar, you can't get all of your questions answered, although we will look at some questions in just a moment. But within the platform, you also have the ability to click on that help option that will take you to our Zendesk, where you can look at Help Center articles, as well as, of course, we always have those who are ready and available to help you throughout your daily implementation. So whether you are clicking that chat feature at the very bottom right of the platform, which during business hours, you can get a live person, but our chatbot will also help you to find help desk articles that are available that will help you manage the issue or the challenge you may be facing at that moment. You also have our support option where you can email anyone on our support team, and that will create a ticket for you so they can help you with the issue that you may be having. And if you need some instructional support, meaning help with some of those best practices that we discussed earlier, then you also have the option to email our instructional services team that can always help you with implementation, whether it's an adjustment with how to manage a bell ringer, tips on how to incorporate something with manual study plans or manual online lessons, as well as any other instructional usage for the platform in your classroom. All right. So now that we have been able to explore the student experience, look at how the teachers and administrators use the platform, and look at best practices, I want to open it up for our questions that have been addressed. I see that there is one. Can you mix and match adaptive and manual modes? For example, have students had on an adaptive plan, but periodically give them a manual assignment? The short answer to that, Doug, is yes, you can. When, of course, especially when you're going through like that best practice that I mentioned about the test prep cycles, right? If you want to help your students, you implement that diagnostic test, you help them get started with that study plan and they get started independently. And then you realize, hey, maybe there's a benefit for all of my students to be doing something at the same time and focusing on some of the same skills during our class period. Then a teacher can go in for a specific class and they can change that adaptive study plan to a manual plan. Now, this is, again, they're not going to be able to do that type of back and forth with an individual student, but they can do that with a group of students and shift them from an adaptive plan to a manual plan to give them a more um, focused, controlled sequence that the teacher may use to accompany them as they are working through their curriculum in class. So yes, it's possible depending on how much control the teacher wants in the classroom, but also again, our best practice is always going to be start with the independent and then they can navigate into a more manual setup. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. All right. Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for your time and participation in our webinar for today. As Jordan has mentioned in the chat, there will be other webinars that are being hosted. So he also put the link where you can register for other sessions, as well as you will receive this recording on tomorrow. So again, thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us today. I hope we said something that will help you as you are navigating through the platform and supporting your teachers as well as your students for improving their ACT scores. Thanks again, all, and have a great day.